Is it going?
Yeah, I clicked it a while ago.
A while ago.
Welcome back, guys. It is Kenzie and Kris again with To Be Ministries. We are helping you guys learn how to study your Bible. Not just read your Bible, but actually study it. Yes. And if you missed our first 3 videos, we encourage you to go back and watch them. They'll be really helpful to give you some background knowledge before we actually dive into a passage and show you what this looks like in the next videos. But one last sort of background information is something important to know, and there's so much more information than we could possibly give you in this short video, but just give you sort of a foundational place to start, and then you guys can do some more research on your own. But it's about the genres of the Bible. So in the last video, we talked about how we have to be author-centered, meaning we have to find what the original author intended to communicate to his original audience, because the Bible is like a letter,
Right.
versus reading just a magazine article or a fictional book. So just like it's important to read it looking for certain things because it's like a letter, it's also important to know that there are different types of writings in the Bible, different categories. Just like you have fiction, nonfiction, there are different categories in the Bible. So some of the different categories that you will often hear is narrative, wisdom, law, epistles, which is also known as letters, prophecy, and then parables. And there might be a couple others that I'm missing. Why is it important to know that there are different genres? Well, if I were to hand you a science fiction book and told you that it was a medical journal, you would read it as fact. You would read it as something you might base your health decisions on, versus it being science fiction. You read it for enjoyment, a story, imagination. So you read different types of books or different types of literature differently. And that's the same with the Bible. We're always looking for the author's original meaning, but in order to find that, we have to know, at least generally, what the type of writing is. So one of the examples I'll give, because we kind of talked about this the other day when we were preparing, is Kris said, well, wait, what's the difference between history and narrative? The difference between history and narrative is going to pick and choose how to tell the story, all truthfully. But just like I might tell you this morning on my way driving over here, I listened to a song in the car. That's true, but maybe I actually listened to 5 songs in the car, but I'm focusing on that one,
Right.
because that one was significant for the story I'm telling her today.
Right.
Versus a historical account would
Right.
say, I got in my car, I turned the car on, it was about this time of day, it was on this date. It's very bullet point of what happened,
Right.
versus poetically, or not even poetically, but creatively crafting
Right.
a story. So that's just one example of why knowing genre is
And I
different.
think about that too, like in the New Testament, when the Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, the Gospels might have the same story, but 2 different authors are coming at it from
Yep.
their perspective. So some of the details there might be more details in one
Yep.
the account than in the other account, because they're focusing on it different. Doesn't mean that they're not both truth in
Right.
the same story.
Yeah. So some other examples, just really quick so that you know. Law would include the book of Leviticus and Deuteronomy. It includes laws that express God's will for the way people are living, priestly duties, customs, festivities. So those are law books. Wisdom books would include Job and Ecclesiastes and Proverbs. So what wisdom books are doing is teaching the meaning of life and how to live. So You're not going to necessarily find in those books strict commands or promises of God, but kind of a general, this is the way to live and why. Poetry would include Psalms, for example, is a big poetic book. Song of Solomon. Again, not strict promises of God. You aren't going to read one verse out of Psalm that says God is our protector and always protects us and assume, just like our last example in our last video, that nothing bad will ever happen. But general truths, this is how it usually is. And honestly, a lot of poetry helps us with worship. Prophecy, which includes a lot of books. There's a lot in the Old Testament. Daniel, Amos. And then, of course, you've got Revelation at the end of the New Testament. So those books are either talking about events that are about to occur. Some of the prophecies in the Bible have already happened. They aren't all for future for us. Or things that are going to occur in the future, and they're usually very... prophecy is very poetic. Yes. A lot of metaphors and similes. Don't read a prophecy and automatically take it as a literal interpretation. The epistles are the letters that are written by apostles, Paul, Peter. So you've got Galatians, Ephesians, Philippians, 1st and 2nd Peter. A lot of the New Testament is epistles. And then there's parables within a lot of the Gospels, which you would...
that Jesus spoke.
That Jesus spoke. They're stories, fictional stories that teach a lesson. So again, a lot of information. Don't feel overwhelmed like you need to know every single genre and how exactly to read it, but just be aware that there are different genres so that when you go to the text, you can say, even in Google, what genre is the book of Daniel, and find out and be aware that that is different than some of the other ones. And that will help you with studying your Bible. Yeah. So in the next video, we're finally going to open our Bibles and actually dig in and observe the text. And Kris is going to teach us in the next 2 videos how to do that.
So come back.
See you then.
See ya.